This is all that remains of an unfinished Star Fox 64 level, one that never made it to the final game. I revealed the first evidence of it almost 2 years ago, but since then I've met some skilled Nintendo 64 hackers and we managed to find the actual model and import it into the game. Here we used the Star Fox 64 decomp project, which, by the way, is basically finished now, to import the Battleship model over the flagship of the sector-wide boss. Ignore the robot, he wouldn't have been in the level, though I do love the way he's taken to his new home. But unfortunately, our knowledge of the stage is pretty limited. For the most part, all we really have is this model and some context clues hidden around the game's source code. First, the level was interchangeably called Battleship, Giant Battleship, and, get this, Ground Ship, which I think is just a funny mistranslation of Grand Ship, since they're spelled the same way in Japanese. We also know the level was entirely all-range mode, maybe like Sector Z. There was no corridor section leading up to it. This makes sense. As Miyamoto said, one of his biggest regrets of the game is that they didn't have more all-range mode bosses. Oh, and the music you're hearing right now is what the stage actually used. It reuses Bols's background music, just like Solar reuses Sector Y's music or Macbeth reuses Titania's music. Interestingly, it also reuses Bols's boss music, suggesting there would have been multiple phases of a level. It also had its own enemy data file, meaning it would have had enemy ships of some sort. On a difficulty scale of 1 to 4, the devs intended for it to be a 2, the same difficulty as Sector X, Fortuna, and Bols. So kind of in the medium range difficulty. It's hard to tell if they ever recorded voice lines for the stage, or even wrote a script for the mission. We know there's a gap between folders 11 and 14, belonging to Bols and Sector Y, which suggests they recorded, or at least left room for, 2 more levels. Maybe one of these missing folders belonged to Battleship, but there are several more levels they could have been. Thankfully, the icon used on the Lilat map also survived. It had a full 3D model like Area 6 in Bols. Once again, I used a decomp project to pull this off. Originally, the level used to be where Sector Y is now. It would have been the hard path from Corneria, after defeating the attack carrier boss. Sector Y would have gone somewhere else.
Fox, we're under attack. Help us out here.
I'm on my way.
In fact, all of the planets would have gone somewhere else, as you can see in this older version of the Lilat map. There are 2 paths leading from Battleship, a hard path and a normal path. The hard path led to Zonus, while the normal path led to Fortuna. The fact that there were 2 paths suggests they had some sort of objective plan for the mission that you could accomplish or fail. The map icon itself is dated April 26, 1996. This means they started work on Battleship early in Star Fox 64's development. At the time, they had just finished the first easy route to Venom, which consisted of only corridor mode stages. They were just beginning to incorporate the all-range mode lost with Star Fox 2. It seems like they worked on the stage a long time until they scrapped it very late in development. Battleship is still mentioned in audio files dated March 15, 1997, which is pretty close to the April 27th release date. The F3D microcode used for the model is a newer version than the 4 demo levels shown off in November of 1996 at Nintendo Space World. It's also clear the Battleship changed a lot over time. Note how the bridge in the icon is all the way over on the starboard side, while on the final model it was centered. There's also a second, older copy of the Battleship left in the file that looks like it was used to test out textures. A lot of his choices seem questionable, but this does seem like just a test. On the other hand, I think some of the parts, like the ones down here, look cooler in the final version. This model was split up into 134 pieces. But unlike the final model, the display list hierarchy was missing, meaning I had to reconstruct it piece by piece. The Battleship model is perhaps the most detailed in the game, with over 400 vertices and 670 triangles. It is the only model to use a branching display list, meaning it's split into many parts, 134 to be exact. While it looks pretty unique, it does resemble some designs from previous Star Fox games, notably the 2 forward and backward prongs and the centered bridge towards the rear of the ship. I love the detail on the bridge, and the exposed parts right here that kind of look like guns. I also think it'd be pretty fun to fly through these large valleys, or underneath the ship. In the same Battleship file, there's also what looks like debris for an explosion effect, like when you destroy a boss. This implies you would have blown up the battleship somehow. Now, Battleship was never polished into an actual level. It was never really finished like all the others. Internally, all the textures are still referred to as test textures. Many of them are just borrowed or modified textures from other models that you can see here. Some come from the R-Wing, some come from the Cornerian fighter, and some are reused from the beta version of the Meteor boss. So, how would the stage have played out? What would the mission have been like? Well, without the level data or the dialogue scripts, we just don't really know. From here on out is mostly just me spitballing. We know the mission has 2 phases, one with Bols's regular music and one where Bols's boss music kicks in, where something changes and shit gets real. We also know, because there's 2 paths, there's some sort of mission objective you can accomplish or fail. Maybe you have to destroy a certain number of enemy ships to continue to Zonus, like in Sector Y to continue to Aquas. Or maybe you have to destroy the battleship before a timer runs out, like in the Fortuna and Katina stages. There's a level in Star Fox Zero that's also pretty much just a big battleship floating in space. The objective of the Salvador stage is to simply destroy all the guns arrayed around the ship. Maybe you would defeat the battleship by destroying all of its guns as well. Or, since the battleship is rendered in separate pieces, maybe you could destroy them one at a time, and each one triggers a little explosion with a debris animation. Unfortunately, without the level data, we'll never really know. So that's currently all we know about the last Battleship stage. But I do have a couple more videos planned to showcase more cut prototype content, so stay tuned.